if they are outspent, or if the 527 groups begin to send out hit mailers, or spend a lot of money opposing them, they can go back for what's called fair fight money, up to $4 million. And then if they win the primary, then they are able then to get the pot that they need to run up to $1.3 million for the general election, and if they need to use fair fight money, $5 million too. So again, they can be competitive against anyone who elects not to use fair election money, and they can be a viable candidate. It is modeled on the Arizona and Maine fair elections model, which has shown to be extremely, extremely successful.
In fact, I'll just try to summarize a few quick things, because it's really important for the voters out there that vote for Proposition 15. It'll be on the ballot this June 8th, but so that people don't overestimate what it will do. And that's why you should vote for it. It's just a pilot program. It only applies to the Secretary of State. It's a voluntary program. Somebody does not have to do that. But it provides public money, and that public money comes from the most appropriate source, which is lobbyists who have right now the lowest registration fee in the country, $12.50 here. It would raise that to $350. That money would then fund those candidates so that we can all see if it works. And if it works for the Secretary of State, I'm sure Carole and I hope we would do it across the board here in California.
Well, I was going to ask, as former candidates, both of you have run for public office. Steve, you're currently serving now. Are there any insights or any particular issues you think that maybe a viewer or a voter might not think about, but an implication that this type of public financing would have in terms of attracting candidates and bringing new voices to the process?
There's two things I would offer to you, and I know Carole knows this. There are people that give you money and they don't want anything except good government. Mm-hmm. And there are other people that give you money and they want something, and it's just really clear that that's out there. And I thought one of the best things I saw was in Arizona, somebody that was a complete, they called it clean money there, complete public money. He talked about how liberating it was that when every bill came up, he was not being lobbied by people that had contributed to his campaign. And as a result, better laws will get passed. People will keep their eye focused on good government and not how's this going to affect my contributions or the contributions that might go to a potential opponent against me.
Now, in terms of areas where public financing has been successful, what are some of the case examples that you would cite?
Well, it's in 5 states and 2 cities and 1 county. Arizona and Maine were the first. They have a 10-year history. They have, I think in Arizona, it's about 73% of their legislators, both Republican and Democrat, run what they call clean. That is, they do not take money except the public money. And then in Maine, it's about 85% of their legislators. Janet Napolitano, the 2-term governor of Arizona, who is now the director of the Homeland Security, she was a clean money governor. Republicans and Democrats like this because they're not dialing for dollars. You know, it takes 2 to 3 hours a day for every congressman to have to take their time and leave the Congress and go to another place and call potential funders. It allows them then to knock on doors and talk to people about what the real issues are. And there's been some amazing results in Arizona and Maine. A good bipartisan health care bill in Arizona comes to mind. And in many, many places, people feel that they are being represented again. We have to restore the confidence of the voter that big money is not in charge, but that the people are being represented again. And that's the big beauty of this California Fair Elections Prop 15, which will be on the ballot June 8th.
Well, it always raises the issue of who is opposed and who is supporting a particular issue. So would you mind, Steve, telling us a little about who has come out in support of this Proposition 15 and who has come out opposed?
You know, the statewide, the traditional good government groups are there. The League of Women Voters, Common Cause, I've got a couple of them here, California Nurses Association, Sierra Club, so all the traditional organizations that have been there. In terms of the opposition, it's really obvious that clean money campaigns like this affect all those people that have benefited and profited from the funneling of contributions and the influence that buys. And those are the lobbyists. Oftentimes it's consultants that run the campaigns for them. And then the most obvious is those special interests that used to buy that influence are not going to like many candidates getting elected without them having an ability to try to influence that. So the traditional big funders are going to be spending a lot of money to try to defeat this. And they will say everything about Prop 15, and the voters really need to know that. And they need to insulate themselves right now. If you hear it about Prop 15, it's paid for by special interest. It's probably not a truthful attack, and we sure hope that people will see through that.
You do know that former Assemblyman for the 38th Assembly District, Keith Richmond, a Republican, has been an original and strong supporter, continuing supporter of this measure. So we do have bipartisan support. There are people who on both sides that recognize how important it is to restore the people's voice, that it's Jack and the Giant. and so we really do have people who believe that on both sides of the aisle that we must restore the balance between corporate wants and the people's needs, because right now we're really, really out of balance. And so I think that's very important that the voter understand that this just isn't a Democrat-Republican issue. This is an issue that our forefathers, Thomas Jefferson and his followers, the Republican Democrats, began fighting with Hamilton and Adams about this very, very issue of what is this democracy. Jefferson believed that it was we the people. He believed that democracy, he trusted the people and he wanted democracy for the people. Adams and Hamilton in the Federalist Papers wanted a democracy of the elite, of the banking class, of the corporate, of the oligarchy. They did not trust the rabble. And so you see throughout our history we've been having this fight. But the problem is that these Supreme Court decisions, beginning in 1886, Santa Clara versus the railroads, and coming down in this last century and a half, it has that whole balance between the corporate wants and the people's needs has more and more become distorted, culminating 2 weeks ago with that Supreme Court decision.
Well, I do want to talk about the Supreme Court decision because it is something that obviously our viewers are very concerned about, this idea of increased corporate influence in politics. Now, this proposition, do you see that it has a greater chance, potentially Proposition 15, of passing in a climate where voters are increasingly concerned about this corporate influence?
I don't think there's any question that it has raised people's awareness, and hopefully it will help with Prop 15. But there's not anything in Prop 15 that stops corporations or unions from spending all the money they want in independent expenditure campaigns. And I think, you know, what's so ludicrous about the Supreme Court ruling is the Supreme Court ruled essentially if it's an independent expenditure, it can't be corruption. And that's the justification, that's the very narrow justification that we can use for campaign contribution limits right now, is that there's this appearance of corruption. They say if the money doesn't go directly to the candidate. I mean, the great line was the response, that only is true if the candidate is blind, deaf, and dumb, you know, because if somebody spent, you know, $100 million on your behalf or attacking your opponent, you do know that, and it does have an influence, there's no question about it. But this won't stop that. It would just give a candidate who said, I've got good ideas, I want to try to run, and I don't want to spend an enormous amount of time raising money, I want to spend time talking to people about good ideas. It gives them a fair shot to at least get heard.